So the first primed question comes from Darshan.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
There's a microphone next to you.
Hi Sherry, I just wanted to ask, are there any significant differences between the recommendations in your scale-up report and those relevant to social and mission-driven businesses? And what can companies do to support that growth?
Thank you. I think you can hear me.
Yeah.
There are, in my mind, very few differences between running a fast-growing social enterprise compared to a for-profit enterprise. If anything, it's more difficult because some of the tools and levers that we have in for-profit businesses are harder to use. On the other hand, there's a mission that you can connect everybody to, and that's a very, very powerful force that's available to leaders of social enterprises. Annika went through the recommendations from the report, which was access to talent, which is absolutely critical and is probably also the #1 plague for social enterprises. After that, it's leadership development. The tools that we need as leaders of social enterprises are exactly the same, and the stresses that we feel as leaders as we grow with the charity and address more customers and more causes and have greater impact is possibly greater. And so the need to provide mentoring and support and help as an ecosystem to make sure that they flourish is just as critical, if not more. Access to infrastructure, and that's one of the things where I love what you did earlier this week with AWS. As a charity founder for schools, depends on shared infrastructure such as AWS so that we can scale quickly, and that's a tool that's available to all of us, both social enterprise leaders and others. Finance, absolutely critical, might have just got harder in the last week, might have, not sure, but on the other hand, we've got some crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, and because the mission is more acute than it was before, maybe it got easier. If I had a request from government as a leader of a social enterprise, it would be, are there things that you can do to give access to information such that I can prove the impact that we know we're having faster and cheaper? And poor Liam will know that we have asked to make it possible to make available a national pupils database so that it's particularly for those of us in education, we can prove at a pinpoint which child was exposed to which combination of queries, I guess, are the experts, or it's apps for good, or whatever, or maybe it's a microbit for all of the 11-year-olds. We should be able to go from that to answer the question, not via a survey of a teacher that lowers their productivity. We should be able to look at the behavior changes of those children because of the subjects they chose or because of how they did a couple of years later. And it's amazing and delightful and astonishing that we hold that treasure trove. And I think making it available so that charities, and I guess other businesses as well, but I'm particularly mindful about charities, can have access to that. We know we have the impact. I don't want to ask a teacher a question because everybody wants that. But let's just look at the behavior change because that's real evidence and it's available to us today. I think it would make a huge difference to all of us. And that, over and above, could be the single greatest gift that central government could give to us social enterprise people.
I mean, that's something we are trying to do. The best way of describing it, but I would say one of the things that Sherry has brought out is that we are moving, and it has been a big journey that we've been on in government, but we are now moving to an age where we rely on data rather than surveys. And one of the big components of that, and you may think that's amazingly basic, but in 2011 we couldn't even break into our own services to understand how many people were using them. We've now been able to do that. If you've ever been to the performance platform, you can see how many people actually use services. And that's been tremendously helpful in helping us design things, and part of that process is now getting into the area where we can start to look at data and base our policy on data rather than anecdote and survey, which is notoriously difficult to do. So that is one of the things that's on the way.
I just want to say I think it was a grant from the Nominate Trust that gave us the insight that such databases even existed, and that they were sufficiently well formatted and in a digital digitally based so that you could make these inquiries. So other countries don't have that. We have that. We should leverage the heck out of it because it will allow us to grow into global, global forces much more easily than other charities in other countries.
Fantastic, thank you. With that prompt for Nominate Trust, Vicky, would you like to ask your question, please? I'm going to try and pinpoint people at opposite ends of the room just to keep Ellie running the whole day.
I want to turn on? No, it's not. I want to shout Ali. I'm Vicky Hearn from Nominate Trust, and thanks, Sherry, for the segue there. It wasn't planned, but it's the process is very well orchestrated. I've got a question about grant funding and the role of that, which is something that's very close to Nominate Trust's heart. I know it's a question that a number of you on the panel could address, but Sam, I was wondering whether you might be able to pick this one up. So, really interested in your view on how grant funding specifically has helped your organisation to scale and deliver social impact.
Yeah, I think grant funding has enabled us to do that in so many different ways, and at vInspired and with the Task Squad programme, we've been really fortunate to be able to secure different parts of grant funding through each stage of our development. So we secured some grant funding from the Nominate Trust through a project they were running, an accelerator programme, which allowed us to test out some of the ideas that we've been kicking around and actually build and develop a minimum viable product to pop it out there to market. We secured a little bit more funding from the Nominate Trust and Google to build on that and get a business model behind it and secure some expertise. But then I think the most important kind of part of grant funding that we had when we were at the cusp of knowing we had a great product, knowing that we were delivering a fantastic service that was required, and having our first few clients and young people on there, but we weren't able to trade off our own revenues at that stage. And we certainly weren't ready for social investment, and we really struggled, and there was a real gap, and we were very fortunate to persuade the Nominate Trust and Nesta to come together to fund us for 18 months, and that has been hugely successful in the fact that within this financial year the Task Squad programme will break even, and we won't be requiring grant funding anymore to deliver our operations in London, and actually what we'll be looking at is partners and supporters to then scale that tested operation across the UK. So that has been, without doubt, Task Squad wouldn't exist and wouldn't have been able to impact the number of young people, wouldn't have been able to get the number of young people we've got into jobs, the number of small employers and startups able to hire young people without that. But I think there's two other big reasons why grant funding has supported us, and it's not just because it's money that we can spend. The first thing is that I think getting support from the likes of Nesta, Google, Nominate Trust really gave the green light and the confidence to our board and to our senior management team that actually Task Squad was a good idea. So I could tell them as the project manager and then the director of Task Squad that this is a goer. I'm telling you in my gut, this is a good one. But they needed more than that, and I think a lot of charity boards and SMTs are rightly a bit risk averse about where they're going to put their money and how they're going to put it into untested ideas, and having the backing from eminently very sensible people to say actually we do think this is a goer meant that it opened up the way that we could deliver the work, the sense of autonomy that the project had had to get the job done, and I think that's really important. But the other thing that our grant funding partners did for us is also open up networks to us. So it was the first time that vInspired had really looked at a Tech for Good project that had a revenue generating part behind it, and helping us open up markets, open up conversations with government, with employers, with civil society organisations that could also help draw candidates to the platform. Saved us an inordinate amount of time, and that's something that I think is absolutely invaluable for charities working in this sector. What I would say is that from my kind of experience, there's not enough grant funding out there to get you over the hump between. There's a lot of grant funding out there that will help you set up your project and build your MVP and test your principles, and then you've got this social investment market. But that bit in between is really, really difficult, and that's where some fantastic projects unfortunately fail and you don't hear of them again. And being able to open up that grant funding market, or even a partnership between impact investors, grant funders, corporates, to kind of get you over that hump is really important.
Brilliant. Thank you. We're going to follow up with a question from Rebecca, simply because it responds directly to what you just said. I don't want this just to be pre-prepared questions, though. So as you're hearing answers, if you want anything that you want to say, please stick your hand up. So whilst there's a microphone running its way to Rebecca. Yes.
So actually, we face the same challenge in the traditional tech sector, in that there's a big gap between seed and Series A, and often you don't get enough money at seed stage to make it to Series A. Are there learnings that we could share across sectors in that space? Because we face many of the same challenges, and I recognise that challenge. Actually, getting from an MVP afterwards is very difficult. Sherry, could you talk to it?
We identified as a scale-up financing gap, and it exists. It's very acute in the tech sector and the for-profit sector, and it's even more acute in the social enterprise, and we have certainly experienced that ourselves as well. Not a lot of lessons except let's fill the gap, because the impact through particularly collaborative efforts can lower the cost per job or inquiry down to 1/100th of what it is historically. So there are some nuggets of extreme impact that we should look for and gather evidence for, and then direct the funders to those things that are working, which is that some of the work of the grants can help signpost it for the follow-on funders.
Fantastic. So let's follow that up directly. Rebecca, can you just shout? Sorry.
Yeah, my best to shout. My question is my question is really aimed at or focused for Cliff, and it ties very much to that point. So how do you see funders working with government, with corporates, with social investors to best advance tech?
Well, thank you. We very much need to think of this as a pathway. And I think that's realization that wherever you're intervening, if it's the very first steps or a little bit further along the line, you really need to know, whether you're a grant maker, an investor or whatever, you need to know what the next step is. And start talking to them before you even start your investment, because there is no point in having a pipeline which has got a break in it. Everybody is wasting their money all along the pipeline if there's any gap along the journey. So we're probably thinking at the start of crowd, we're then thinking of sort of angel stage investors, crowd and so on, perhaps using some of the tax breaks before we get on to the more institutional social investment funds and so on. But we need to think about the timeline. How long does it really take if your tech for good is in healthcare, for example, in clinical healthcare? You're going to need a controlled trial. You need to think of 3 years for that, plus a year either side probably to 4.5 for it, 5 years. How many of us think of that kind of timeline? That's the kind of timeline that's going to be needed. So mapping, understanding who's next. And I think that's starting to come together. As in the Foundations gathering yesterday, and what everybody was talking about was that issue of understanding which tool was most useful at which stage. Is it grant? Is it venture philanthropy? Is it crowd? Is it social investment? But we have a particular problem in charities and the asset and profit locked end of social enterprises, and that is that for investment we can really only use debt as an instrument, and debt is a pretty useless instrument for growth in any circumstances. If you need to move fast, if you're consumer facing and you need to get ahead of the commercial competitors, it's a terrible method. And it's not just the money that won't work. If you can distribute equity, if you can take equity investment, you can give equity to the staff, and that may mean that you don't need to pay them so much at the start because they're going to get an upside. You won't have the expertise that some angels bring. You are less likely to be able to draw in the friends, family and fools money at the early stage, because where's the return for them? And there's also the governance culture and style of charities, which tend to operate on a sort of 3-monthly board meeting cycle, and anybody who's tried to do a consumer-facing tech project will know you really need weekly, if not daily, cycles. So all sorts of challenges on that. Perhaps one other thing I'd put on that's a positive which is that a number of the commercial incubators and accelerators are now much more interested than they used to be on social tech. Certainly the experience that we had at Unlimited with Wyra, when Wyra Unlimited Social Incubator Fund money closed, Wyra were so impressed with the results just on a commercial basis, let alone on a social impact, that they opened the doors to their commercial incubators to social projects. So that is developing.
Are there any follow-up questions to that? Because this seems to be such a crucial issue. Sally.
Yeah. So I started my own, and I run a club, and it's a social venture, so a mission-led organisation, and completely, Kim knows, I've talked to him about this. We have to make decisions on sixpence, but I predict that charities, in the future, there'll be just maybe a dozen super charities. I think that the rate that charities are closing for right or wrong reasons means that we will end up with just ones in specialist areas, if you like, youth or aid or health or whatever it is. So that was one of the reasons that we set up as a CLS, a company limited by shares, but also to bring social investment in. But still, although we've been really fortunate to have some great funding from some of the big bodies, some of whom are here today, the big institutions that we all know, the local authorities and the other trusts and so on out there still don't want to fund CLS. They're still really suspicious that they're making profit, when we're actually making profit to do something good. And we can prove that as well. It's a real close call still.
Okay, that sounds more like a statement than a question, but I'll pretend that there's a question at the end and a response to it. I think
so how do we break that?
So many tech for good ventures use limited by share models for all the reasons that are just enumerated. The question is, it's very controversial in the social sector. People are suspicious that it won't stay social. They are suspicious of mission drift. Many grant makers are limited by their own mandate to charities and asset-locked social enterprises only. And the Charity Commission regulators are just trying to put a damp squib on the whole thing. Hopefully we can fight that off in the autumn when it's the second round of consultation. So what can we do? Well, the government has launched a thing called a mission-led business review, which is trying to understand this area more and see if greater confidence can be given in some way. My worry is that that's a very short-term piece of work and it may not be able to get sufficient data. Big Society Capital, we're following on with a more in-depth analysis of the businesses that say they're social. And just to understand how they commit to that, how much commitment they've got to it. And I know that Unlimited are doing something similar on a people-based survey through the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. So we'll understand a bit more. There are ways in which you can lock in the social, even if the company itself is not locked into social mission. And a great example of that is Patients Know Best, where the social lock is that this Patients Know Best is it's all of your health and social care records on your smartphone in a clinically accepted form. The social lock is that only you as the patient have the key to that data. Nobody else has that data. The company cannot sell your data because they don't have it. They can't access it. So there are methods like that which should give greater confidence. Meanwhile, I love Run Club. I think Run Club is one of the pieces, it's that infrastructure thing of if you create a platform which makes it easier for people to do local, small-scale, largely voluntary things like run youth clubs, it's much easier for everybody to do it. Hugely more activity can come. How valuable is something like that? Really fantastic.
You made me think about Raspberry Pi. I'm on the board of the foundation and the trading company. Can you hear? So Raspberry Pi has a trading company that is 100% owned by the foundation, and the profits, 100% of the profits are taken up into the foundation so that it can fulfill its mission, which is charitable. And I think looking at and gathering role models and examples like that will be helpful for all of us going forward. That looks like it may be a sustainable model. I know when I was chair of Water Unlimited, again, we were looking at the different models. What we as an industry and an ecosystem need to do is gather the examples so that for those who resist change or are fearful of change or new things, we can give them the confidence that the new things that are being tried actually are effective and better than the status quo or not. But let's gather the evidence to support those decisions.
Thank you. John, you raised your hand. Do you want to follow up?
Yeah, inequality is the issue right at the heart of Brexit and our divided nation. And that's financial inequality, yeah, but also access to power, the ability to have your voice heard. Co-ops distribute both power and wealth. Are co-ops the 170-year-old hack of capitalism that could scale tech for good?
Did you hear that question at the back? It was brilliant. John, stand up. Can you turn around and shout loudly? Anyone like to say?
Inequality is the basic issue at the heart of Brexit and our divided nation. Not just financial inequality, but also access to power and the ability to have your voice heard.
It's just really brief.
Co-ops distribute both sides of that. So they lock in one member, one vote access to, like you sharing the wealth, but you're also sharing the decision making. So our co-ops, the 170-year-old hack of capitalism that can scale tech for good.
Thank you very much, John. Sherry.
They might be, let's take a look. I really don't know.
That's the problem. No one knows about it.
But also let's look into it. Maybe part of that review that you mentioned, that Cliff mentioned, can look into that. No reason why not. Charities have used member societies. If you look at CRUK, that's member driven. Going Back Straight High, we have members that own the foundation, and they vote in the trustees and have trustees, and that's very much like a cooperative. It might well be, because it's got the corporate governance that you need.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a boom in new co-ops, new mutuals, and things like community shops, community pubs, community broadband, community energy projects, where government keeps trying to chop them, but a whole set of new mutual-based schemes. What I haven't seen is co-op digital. That I think is a real challenge, and I would be fascinated to see examples. I think co-ops and mutuals are one part of the future, and they have a very particular place in localities.
Will co-ops feature in the report that Big Society Capital is doing about different organisational formats for locking in mission?
We've already supported a number of funds which support in that kind of way, and you only have to look at the work of, for example, Plunkett. Really fantastic work.
So we've talked a lot about capital, organisational shape. Let's talk about some other challenges around scaling. Umi, I think you have a question.
Question for you, Jane. We think about all does some amazing stuff. Amazing scale and quality. How have you been able to achieve it? And what have been your biggest challenges?
Thanks. Can I start by just saying congratulations to Annika and Dan and colleagues for creating CAST. I just think it's the right thing at the right time, so really credits. It's a fabulous initiative. I also should say that I actually recently left Big White Wall, so to start a new company that's also focused on tech for good. And I'd like to draw on more than Big White Wall's experience, those of peer entrepreneurs who are part of the World Economic Forum and others, because I think that some of the lessons are really sort of loud and clear, and I guess that the thing that I always think is the most important is to focus mostly on what's causing you pain and isn't going right, and that way you'll scale. Because ultimately it's the thing that's causing you pain that is the core of what you need to address. But let me just talk about two things that I think that really helped with Big White Wall over what was nearly as old as Facebook. And so if we're talking scale, we haven't done a damn thing earlier. But two things that I think really help with success. One is engagement and one is with efficacy. Engagement, fundamentally, if you don't create a service or product that is engaging for the people that it's for, then you're not going to go anywhere. And for me, that places the words co-creation, as Annika mentioned in her opening talk, right centre. And that doesn't mean these days that you have to gather people into groups and have focus groups and so on, although actually recently I found myself doing that again with lots of young people. But you just need to look at your data. You need to do loads of A and B testing of absolutely everything, and your data will tell you what level of engagement you've got, and you've got feedback loops. Time and again, I still see people producing non-agile products in this day and age, and that is a waste of money. Your product needs to be agile. You need to be looking at your data daily. You need to be looking how it's engaging people. You need to be being responsive to the people that it's for. So engagement for me is one of the principles. The other one I just briefly pick up on is efficacy. For me, if it doesn't work, if it's not having the impact that it was designed to have, then you shouldn't be doing it. And again, I have seen many organisations whose statistics are interesting, shall we say, and I would not place a great deal of faith in them. I think that you've got to be able to demonstrate that you're making a difference. I think that Big White Wall in its early days took things like its clinical governance and generating an evidence base that it actually was making a difference to people's mental health incredibly seriously. Not least, would I say, and this is another factor in success, through a joint venture partnership with the Tavistock and Portman. And partnership across sectors is so critical in building tech for good at scale. So those are just a couple of things. On the other side, money, people have mentioned it a lot. I've been working with what I call a blended model, really, between profit and social impact. I still think there's a need for an intense piece of research on impact investment, where I think that it's still largely driven by economic parameters and not by social impact parameters, and I think there's a need to rebalance that quite critically. And in fact, if Kirsten's going to do a piece of research, could you put your names to that one? I think it's a big one. And the other one is marketing. And without marketing, you go nowhere. One of the critical factors in Big White Wall was that once it got to people, they really loved it and they engaged in large numbers, but we were dependent on other people to market it. We were dependent on local authorities, we were dependent on local NHS, we were dependent on college or the university, often who believed marketing was sticking a leaflet on a wall in a digital era. So I think that, there's another area where cost could bring something to bear, which is really generating some of the good practice around how you ultimately reach, not just reach your target audience, but if you're reliant in a B2B model on a third party, how you motivate them to ensure that what you've got is marketed well.
That's fantastic, thank you. So we talked about marketing, talked about investment, organisational structure, but you also mentioned the importance of directly working and building with users. So with that, Harry, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. So, the mantelpiece at Aviation House grows with awards for the government digital service and its role in helping deliver user-focused services. What does that teach us for the social sector? And is there a role for some mythical beast that one might label a social digital service? If so, how many legs has it got?
Thanks very much. Interestingly, I'd like to say very big thanks to Annika for organising this, because when we came and sat down, to start thinking about how we could help CAST. One of the components of this was, yes, GDS has got a lot of experience in changing a large organisation. But you're not a large organisation, you're a collection of organisations. So one of the things that I won't say is that we should create another charity digital service in the same way that we haven't created a local government digital service. Because actually that whole concept of creating one thing in the centre can be problematic. And we moved, our principal organising function in 2011 was to take a government which works like that and to start to bring in functions that work like that. To share things and to share common components, because we felt that the design of services and the way that they've been put together by the government was not actually, we were totally irrelevant in how we reached our citizens. And so it was a fundamental, almost existential problem for the government at that point. But our organising principle was to make it centralised and for 2 or 3 years to be very clear about having a central function which would allow everyone to build up their digital functions. And what you see now is that we have very strong leadership within the digital services across departments within governments. And if you look at, just take an example of somebody like Kevin Cunnington in DWP, who helps create and build digital services across government. Mark Durnley's work in the revenue has been doing that, has been building it within the departments. But the core process has been based on the fundamental components we built at the beginning, which were, let's build services which work for users. So, what is the user need is still the most important question. So we need to design services for users to use them. And also, let's make sure that we build using a certain set of principles, so things like digital by default, which is the sine qua non of passive-aggressive civil service. So having those principles at the centre, but also making sure that the components and what we put together was reusable, and so people could use them again. So our source code is all open. Our manuals and our techniques and our tradecraft and the way we went about things, all of those things, the standards we have at the centre, they are all open so that people can use them. Because the one thing we don't do as a government is we don't compete. We don't compete with the Swedish government to give Swedish people driving licenses. Right? It's a fundamental thing. So we can share and we can work across borders with other people and other governments, and that's how we originally envisaged it. That's now some of the things we're starting to use, where we can share techniques and code, and this idea of having open source government is what will drive that. And so I think what within the charity sector is that you're not competing, you're not competitors. We have that great thing. And also you're not trying to go and plough everyone's furrow. Everyone here seems to be wanting to collaborate, and therefore I think as a function that can help provide advice and can help provide the commonality of services and best practice and how to do things would be tremendously powerful, and something that could help you aggregate procurement in some circumstances so that you can buy things commonly. That's good, but also aggregate your ability to work with each other to develop common problems, because one of the things we discovered in government was that there were 50, 60, 70 different CRMs in one department. There were thousands of ways of writing, and people wrote their own booking services. Booking an appointment was something the internet solved years ago. And so it's a way of, you could have a central function which could help that, but don't, whatever you do, try and make it a huge, organised, central charity digital service, because that will eat itself. It needs to be something which you help and you put together and you encourage to make work, but don't make it something which is in and of itself a forcing function. And then just one last thing, because my colleagues at the back, Siobhan and Robert, are here from the partnerships team in the Cabinet Office. One of the things I think such a thing could also help with is the being able to kick down the door in government to get the information that you need, that Sherry talked about. In many ways, knowing how to get to the right person is so important and can save you so much time as you develop services, that I would really recommend you link up, because government really does want to help you. But in many ways we can't quite express how. And so Siobhan and Robert are great at helping people go through the process. They're waving at the back. They are great at helping people identify that core route, because to get to that particular data source, don't expect there's an organised way of doing it. And they can help you through the wild jungle to do that.
Can I stop? Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. Sorry. We've rapidly run out of time, as with every good question time, so we have just one thing I'd like to do. I asked the panel to think about how they can use your expertise to support their work as well. So if you can think of one challenge or one problem you'd like to share with them, or just one piece of advice to sum up. For those of you that have lots of questions that haven't had a chance to ask them, please do use the TechGood Twitter hashtag. If we can't pick them up directly, all of the panel members' Twitter names are there, so use those as well. But we'll also try and group them all and send them all and try and find answers for you. So starting with Cliff at the end, as we pass the microphone back, hopefully one last point, and then we'll have to leave the stage.
Okay, I'm going to go a bit lateral here. And it comes off of this government, and maybe there should be a social digital service. But we are not here in the social sector to ask our questions. We're here to hear the questions of the poor and disadvantaged. We are not here to start from where we are. We're here to start from where they are. And I spend a lot of time working in mental health, where an avalanche of research by people who do not have mental health problems purported to answer questions which were of no relevance whatsoever for people who lived with mental health problems. Just get out there, stop thinking about what should happen, and understand what will happen, because the poor and disadvantaged want it. Thank you.
Okay, so mine is anybody who wants to collaborate. We've just started a new company. It's using artificial intelligence. It's focused on young people. It's trying to help them develop healthy habits, whether those are social, physical, ethical, or whatever. Really keen to collaborate with others, working with particularly the teenage group. And so if you've got a great product or a service in that area with good content, or you're interested in talking further, just get in touch.
Spirit of speed, my one line would be don't do it all yourself, you can't. Too much.
I'm thinking more of Founders for Schools, and we aim to make it easier for children from particularly disadvantaged backgrounds to understand the future careers that they may have, and we do that by putting them in contact with business leaders. So if you have access to very disadvantaged individuals and they're thinking about their impact on the world, come and talk to me. We'd like to talk to you about how we can do that together.
Adding on, for not doing it all yourself, I mean, my plea would be for those that are in voluntary sector organisations and with voluntary sector organisations, don't use the Tech for Good movement and starting internal social enterprises as a way to get one up on the market. Collaborate with those that are in the same space as you, because you'll get to market quicker, you'll get access to funding quicker. The funding, particularly in the youth sector, is cannibalising at the moment, and the only way that these approaches are going to scale is if organisations break down some of those barriers and collaborate.
Well said. Thank you so very much. We're going to have to end now because of time. Any more questions, any more thoughts, please just chuck them on Twitter or send them to the hi@wearecast.org.uk account.